Now imagine the air being so dirty you can smell and taste it. Well, that's the situation in Beijing, which is facing another smoggy day. Air quality was considered hazardous all weekend, and some environmentalists say it is the worst air on record. CNN's Stephen Zhang is in Beijing for us this morning. So, Stephen, what is it like there now?
Well, Patricia, as you can probably see or not see behind me, the skyline is barely visible, but the sun has come out, so things are still bad, but a little better than over the weekend. On Saturday, another sunny day, the sun was totally blocked by this thick layer of toxic air, reducing visibility for drivers and choking pedestrians like myself on the streets. Now, the numbers were especially bad on Saturday. We keep talking about PM 2.5, the number that measures these tiny particles in the air that can go straight into your lung or bloodstream, causing the most harm to your health. That number, if it goes above 300, considered hazardous. On Saturday, in some parts of Beijing, that number reached almost 1,000. And so the smog has really wreaked havoc on transportation and people's daily life, with many people rushing to the hospital for respiratory problems and also rushing to stores to buy masks. And this smog has also spread beyond Beijing, North China, to other parts of China. Government officials say more than 30 cities across the country reported air quality index above 300 on Saturday, and this trend is expected to continue for the next few days with no major relief in sight. Patricia?
Now, Stephen, you say the sun is out. It looks like a white wall behind you. I can't imagine living like that. What are people saying? There seemed to be some buzz from what I could tell on social media. Are people very angry about this?
People are, but it's sort of interesting because social media, people are, of course, complaining about the air quality and also voicing their concerns and frustration. But there's also just this sense of resignation, with people basically accepting this is a way of life here, part of living in Beijing. Many jokingly saying living in Beijing is not unlike dealing with biological warfare on a daily basis. So for those of us who have lived here long enough, we feel like we just have to hold our breath a bit longer, because it's been like this before, although things were especially bad. And as you mentioned, you could smell it, you could taste it, and we'll just have to deal with it.
China has spent another day blanketed by dangerous air. Pollution levels have reached record highs in the last few days, and the state-run Xinhua news agency says that a rare orange warning has been issued because of low visibility. I'll just take a look at this. On the top, you see Beijing on a clear day, and below, the city skyline just blotted out by the smog. And reports of respiratory problems and sales of face masks have skyrocketed. People have been told to stay indoors. The latest reading by the U.S. Embassy in Beijing rates the air quality as very unhealthy. But it was this off-the-charts measurement on Saturday that really raised concern. Now, the reading here is 755 on a scale that tops out at 500. Now, China's government usually measures larger particles in the air, but that practice has drawn criticism, even from pro-Beijing newspaper, the Beijing Global Times. Now, an opinion piece published on Monday reads, in the future, the government should publish truthful environmental data to the public. It goes on to say that the choice between development and environmental protection should be made by genuinely democratic methods. Let's get more now on the smog that's choking many cities in China right now. Mari Ramos joins us now at the World Weather Center with that. Mari.
Hey, Chrissy, I was just checking the latest Twitter feed from where you got that reading there that you just showed us. And just even 18 hours ago, they had another off-the-chart reading, and that was the last one that they literally said off the charts. After that, it's gone from that to hazardous and then to unhealthy. So it's still a pretty serious situation there for people across this area. So let's talk a little bit about the smog. This is what it looks like from space. This is a picture from Sunday, and a lot of this is just that pollution that is sitting over the same general area. Beijing, and actually this part of China, has a very particular problem. Not only are we talking about millions and millions of people, industry, automobiles, and everything that comes with that. Normally you would tend to have an air quality problem, but then they also have the problem of geography, and they have the problem of weather. All of these three things combining to give us the situation that we have right now. First of all, topography. We have mountains that are here to the north, and so when the wind is either very still or generally blowing out of the east, it just kind of gets trapped here along the mountains and it can't go anywhere. So it just sits right over this bowl, so to speak, right in this area of lower elevation, and it's pretty significant. The other thing that we have happening is high pressure. High pressure is descending air. It's almost like putting a lid right over this area. So there's no mixing of the air. Those polluted particles can't escape anywhere, and everything is just kind of stagnant and sitting over the same place. There's no mixing in the atmosphere. And so you end up with this soup of nastiness, just kind of blanketing this entire region. Beijing is one of the cities that had the problem, but you can see that this is widespread and it affects really millions of people across northeastern China. We're going to start to see a little bit of a change with this pollution that is trapped at the surface because there's a cold front coming through, and that is going to help mix the air up just a little bit. There's only about a 20% chance of rain, but that's not going to be the thing that we'll be looking for. We'll be looking for that change in the wind direction that could help with this problem. 100 is considered unhealthy. We were, like you said, off the charts over the last, since Saturday, Sunday, and even earlier today on Monday. So that's a big deal. We get a lot of short and long term health effects that happen here. That's a huge concern long term for the population. The World Health Organization saying there's 1.3 million deaths related to outdoor pollution worldwide. So that's a huge thing. Transportation delays in the air, on the roadways, in the railways, because of the lack of visibility, like you said, that orange warning that was in place. And infrastructure, this is not something we think about a lot, but the more polluted the air is, you got to think about all those chemicals that are in the air. That also affects corrosion in buildings, problems with bridges, overpasses, so you need more maintenance, and they spend more money than trying to keep all of these things kind of in place. So -3 right now in Beijing. Like I was saying, we do have a cold front that's going to come in, that's going to help. Already we're starting to see that wind shift direction from the east, now more toward the west, and that's going to help things out. Something I also want to tell you about over here across Japan, terrible, terrible blizzard. We have some pictures to show you from that area because they've been getting just hammered with some extremely heavy snowfall. I haven't been able to confirm the snowfall totals just yet, but they are very significant. Some people calling it the worst snowfall, the worst blizzard in at least 20 years across the city. Hundreds and hundreds of flights have been canceled, not just in Tokyo, but around the region, and roadways, like you see right there, Christy, not easy to get around. It doesn't snow in Tokyo all the time. It's rare. But when you get this kind of snowfall, it is a big deal. We're going to start to see an improvement in the weather for you in Tokyo, but the snow will continue along that western side of central parts of Japan. So a lot going on weather-wise. Breathe easy in Beijing. Hopefully tomorrow you'll get a little better air and dig out of the snowfall there in Tokyo. Back to you.
It's not even 6 in the morning in Beijing, and Zhou Yi is already out of the house. He isn't up just to walk his dog.
It's kind of a habit for me after over 6 years.
Since 2013, Zhou has been photographing the same spots day in, day out, keeping a record of what the air looks like. He posts the images on China's version of Twitter, Weibo, where followers can compare the good and the bad. It all began on a particularly smoggy winter's morning.
During that time, nobody knows what's the cause for that kind of, the air quality. And we cannot get a good explanation, whether it's from factory or from industry, from whatever. But we kind of feel that maybe something wrong, and we would like to find out.
China does publish an air quality index measuring concentrations of hazardous particles, but it's less stringent than the US standard. In any case, Zhao thinks nothing could be clearer than an image.
You don't need to wait until people to publish the report. You just simply take a picture, and the picture will tell you the real time.
Over the past 2 years, Zhao says Beijing's air quality has drastically improved. Countrywide, official data shows a 9.3% drop in PM2.5 particles across 338 cities in 2018. That's a measurement of tiny particulates that can penetrate deep into the lungs. Following a severe bout of smog in 2016 that smothered 500 million people, the government tightened its campaign to clamp down on pollution.
Some of the measures industries have had to follow include upgrades to more environmentally friendly equipment, as well as strict curbs on emissions. Many of those that were either unable or unwilling to comply had to shut down.
But as China's trade war with the US continues, there are signs air quality may suffer.
This year, we do see kind of a rebound of the pollution because there's this kind of effort to boost up infrastructure building, to bolster GDP growth. So there is a slightly relaxation of environmental protection.
Diao is optimistic China won't completely reverse the gains. He says the country takes public health much more seriously now, but that may mean sucking up the effects of a slowdown until the trade war takes a breather. Patrick Fock, TRT World, Beijing.
So it might not seem like it, but it's the middle of the day here in Beijing. The air is so polluted that it's darkened the sky. Now, recent studies show that even breathing this kind of air for an hour can reduce a person's life expectancy by 20 minutes. It's akin to being a heavy smoker, smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes every day. So we wanted to know, how are people in this city coping with the bad air?
我就这几天避免出门，避免出门。
I'm trying to avoid going outside. My throat hurts. I think people should drive less and all the factories should be shut down.
I don't have a face mask. I am used to the bad air now because I always work on the streets. On days like this, it's very easy to fall ill. The smog definitely harms people's health.
I have to keep working to earn a living. I haven't bought any face masks. Pollution is a serious issue, but ordinary people like me have no say in how to deal with it.
That pessimism is widespread. Recent surveys show the majority of people in China's biggest cities have little faith the polluted air will improve in the next 5 years. Despite pledges coming out of the Paris conference, most believe the dirty air is here to stay. Celia Hatton, BBC News, Beijing.
Well, welcome to Shijiazhuang, a city a little less than 300 kilometers from Beijing, and one that over the past month has had the rather unenviable honor of being China's most polluted. In fact, by some measures, it is the most polluted city on the planet over that period. Of course, it is just an extreme example of a problem affecting a huge swathe of northern China at the moment, with a pollution cloud hanging over this country from the Russian border in the far northeast all the way down to the central cities of Chongqing and Chengdu, a sweep of a few thousand kilometers or so. Of course, underneath the cloud live hundreds of millions of people, and they are currently struggling with the impact of this toxic air on their lives and livelihoods.
It can be completely dark, as if you're walking in the clouds. The smog impacts my children's health. Coughing is the usual symptom.
I've heard some people say that they are considering leaving Shijiazhuang, moving to the south of China. Have you ever thought of doing the same?
Of course I want to leave, but I cannot afford to. I live here. The whole city and the whole country is polluted. You have to go abroad.
Over the past 30 days, the average air quality level in this city has registered as hazardous on the official scale. Amid mounting public anger across China, the government is pledging to clean up the air and is investing heavily in renewable technology. But there are good reasons for caution and some skepticism. The two main sources for all of this toxic smog are the heavy reliance on coal as the dominant form of power generation and the high and still growing levels of car ownership. And neither of those things look set to change anytime soon.
This video is sponsored by Skillshare. The first 500 people to use the link in the description get their first 2 months free. In 2008, China hosted its first ever Olympic Games. Over 10,000 athletes from 200 countries competed in 300 summer events. But for China, it was about much more than athletics. In many ways, this was Beijing's grand entrance to the world. As the most watched televised event in history at the time, it was the perfect opportunity to show off a healthy, happy, prosperous China to an international audience. one that has long been confused about and often deeply suspicious of the Middle Kingdom. So its government spared no expense. The city was given an extreme makeover, the kind you can afford when your economy relies on pouring concrete on any surface you can find, and then pouring again because why not? More labor means more economic growth. $9 billion was spent improving public transit, doubling the size of the subway. Ugly power lines were buried underground, flowers planted, and 20 new buildings constructed. Like the iconic Bird's Nest, which held the opening ceremony on August 8, 2008 at exactly 8:08 p.m., a lucky number in China. The 4-hour event cost $100 million, $7,000 per second. And flying overhead, you would have noticed that although it was raining elsewhere that night, the sky above the open-roof stadium was perfectly clear. Only minutes after the ceremony ended, the clouds magically reappeared. The event was so important and China so determined that it changed the weather, literally shooting chemicals at the sky with rocket launchers. And yet, even when its image mattered the most, China still couldn't control its pollution. The city was covered in its signature, dangerously thick gray smog. Air quality was so bad that some athletes changed events. Others decided not to compete at all. But what looks like a hopeless environmental disaster, China sees as an amazing economic opportunity. It's now on a quest to clear its air, clean its energy, and grow its economy, not despite these things, but because of them. There are two ways to look at environmental impact, depending on whose payroll you're on. Per capita, China's CO2 emissions, for example, are nothing special, about the same as Poland or Mongolia. Nowhere near a rich country like the US, the United Arab Emirates, or especially Qatar. Wow. But in total, China makes up a quarter of the world's emissions. With a population of 1.3 billion, its problem is that it's just so darn big. As the world's largest car market, China has as many motor vehicles as the US has people, 322 million. So not only does it have that fun LA traffic, but also the kind of pollution that stops planes from landing. The kind of pollution where you can't see your fingers. The kind you can vacuum up, condense, and make a brick out of. But unlike America, where the automobile means freedom, and freedom, well, that's our thing. The right to commute in a 16-seat SUV by yourself is probably written in the Constitution. China can and does just say no. Cities like Beijing, Guangzhou, and Guiyang only issue a tiny number of new license plates a year through a lottery. Although tiny is kind of an understatement. The chance of winning is approximately 1 in 783, or was until Beijing lowered the quota from 90,000 to 40, and now your chances are 1 in 2031. Locals joke they're more likely to win the actual lottery. One government official was arrested for accepting bribes of $30,000 for a single plate. Shanghai, on the other hand, auctions them off to the highest bidder, with an average price of $14,022, nearly twice China's per capita GDP, and considerably more than most of the cars they're attached to. So good luck buying a car unless you have very deep pockets, powerful friends, or amazing luck. Even so, there are limitations. In Beijing, the last number of your license plate determines which days you can drive on. For example, right now until April 7th, numbers 1 and 6 can't drive on Monday, 2 and 7 can't on Tuesday, 3 and 8 on Wednesday, and so on. All are allowed on the weekend. The numbers switch 4 times a year, and rule breakers get 3 points on their license, 12 of which suspends your ability to drive. These restrictions have helped reduce pollution, but only so much. The Air Quality Index, which measures pollution, is usually in the range of 50 to 100 in cities like LA, San Diego, and most of southern China. In the north, it's often 3, 4, even 5 times that much. Now, it's easy to see these numbers, think that China focuses only on economic growth, and conclude that its government really doesn't care that much about pollution. But that's not entirely true. For one, healthcare is really expensive. Pollution kills an estimated 1.6 million people in the country a year. It also has a significant impact on tourism. What makes this issue so unique is that it can't be hidden. Smog is there for everyone to see, and not in some far western province, but in the capital, where politicians live and work. So even Chinese-owned state media reports on the problem. And while it isn't exactly known as the protest capital of the world, it has seen a few. If that wasn't incentive enough, enter electric cars. Perhaps nowhere on Earth is better suited to lead the EV revolution. Millions of Chinese are entering the middle class, looking to buy their first car, and have no stigma against electric vehicles. It's great for local companies, it helps grow the larger economy, and it's good for everyone's lungs. So it's no surprise that China buys more EVs than the rest of the world combined. In the US, there's California, and everywhere else. The Golden State buys almost 10 times more EVs than second place New York. In Palo Alto, you turn your head when you see a car that's not a Tesla. China is to the world what California is to the US. It's making EVs irresistible. Like police cars and ambulances, they're exempt from the last number rule, and have a separate line to apply for a license plate. Many don't even require a driver's license at all, with a top speed of around 40 miles an hour. Smart cars cost $20,000 to $30,000. These cost about $1. The government has given Tesla permission to build a factory outside Shanghai, converted all Shenzhen buses to electric, and doubled its charging infrastructure in the last year. Of course, cars are only part of the problem. China also burns an insane amount of coal, one of the worst environmental offenders. Even India pales in comparison. But these numbers are somewhat misleading. There are 3 common types of coal plants: subcritical, supercritical, and ultra-supercritical. The first being low temperature and less efficient, the last being high temperature and more efficient. Over time, China has been building fewer and fewer subcritical plants and more efficient ones. By 2020, it's estimated that every Chinese coal plant will be more efficient than every coal plant in America. China doesn't have nearly as much natural gas, so instead it's largely moving straight to renewable energy, which it now produces more of than any other country. Like electric cars, its government has an economic incentive. Compared to fossil fuel, renewable energy usually creates far more jobs. In fact, coal employs fewer Americans than fast food chain Arby's. Already, Beijing's air pollution has fallen by 35%. This, according to experts, could save 20 million residents over 3 years of their lives. And even when its weaker economy in 2018 made car sales fall to a 2-decade low, electric and hybrid cars continued to grow. At a time when the US is removing EV tax credits and environmental protections, it's more important than ever that China take the lead. Its electric car revolution is just getting started. It's anyone's guess how the economy will change in the next 20 years, but it's always safe to invest in yourself. Why not learn about the stock market so you can invest in clean energy or new battery technology with this class on Skillshare? Or watch Kurzgesagt teach you how to animate your thoughts into a YouTube video like theirs. You already like watching videos, so why not watch your favorite creator dive deeper into a subject they know and care a lot about? Skillshare is full of professional photographers, designers, CEOs, chefs even, who have lots of knowledge and experience to share with you. Over 7 million people are already learning with Skillshare, and you can try it out totally free. Get 2 months just by being one of the first 500 people to use the link in the description.
At first glance, it looks like Delhi is blanketed by a thick, wintry fog. But the sheer number of people covering their mouths shows this is something more sinister. For almost a week, people have been gasping for breath, inhaling a toxic combination of microscopic particles and noxious fumes. Many have heeded the warning to stay home, but some are getting tired of that.
We are worried about our health. That's why we were avoiding the cycling for the last 4 or 5 days. But finally we thought now how much we can avoid our cycling. This is our weekly routine.
At times, Delhi's air has been almost 10 times worse than the Chinese capital, Beijing, a city better known for its battle with pollution.
Here's what makes the smog so dangerous. Air quality is assessed by counting matter with a diameter of less than 2.5 micrometers. We're talking absolutely tiny here, around 30 times finer than a human hair. So small it can only be detected with an electron microscope, and small enough to get into your lungs and pass into the bloodstream, causing heart and respiratory problems. The Air Quality Index puts the upper limit for good air at no more than 50, and the highest and most hazardous level on that index is 300 plus. The count for Delhi at times over the last few days has climbed to double that, up past 600.
Masks may make people feel better, but they offer little real protection from air pollution like this. Experts say it's the same as smoking 40 to 50 cigarettes a day. Construction projects, vehicle fumes and home fires during winter are all being blamed, but most believe farm fires are the main culprit here. Farmers in neighbouring states clearing their fields by burning them. It's against the law, but it's also cheap and easy, and every year state governments are accused of turning a blind eye. Emergency hospital admissions have risen between 20 and 35%. Government leaders have ordered the closure of more than 6,000 schools, halted construction, and are limiting trucks to only those carrying essential supplies. Forecasts of rain in the coming days may offer some respite, but forecasters say it'll only be temporary. In the meantime, those who can are staying home, but many others in Delhi simply can't afford to, nor do they have the money to get to hospital when the smoky grey haze becomes too much to bear. Miranda Hond, Al Jazeera.
India Gate, Delhi's famous memorial to the soldiers who died in the First World War. It's late afternoon in mid-November, and this place is teeming with tourists, keen to get a glimpse of the famous memorial, but usually also to soak up some sun in one of the parks nearby. Today, however, as the capital city chokes under some of the worst pollution it's seen in years, you have to get within the range of a couple of hundred meters even to see the archway, and the sun is nowhere to be seen.
At the beginning of this week, smoke from crop burning in the northern states of Punjab and Haryana blew over much of North India, sending the levels of tiny, harmful particulates in the air literally off the charts. With Delhi under a blanket of smog, the Indian Medical Association declared the city in a state of public health emergency.
IMA declares Delhi in a public health emergency state. School बंद हो जाने चाहिए, लोग घरों से बाहर नहीं निकलने चाहिए, खासकर elderly, pregnant ladies, बच्चे, heart के patient, asthma के patient, बाकी सब लोगों को भी precautions लेनी चाहिए.
Local residents who suffered similar conditions last year say the pollution is taking a toll on their health.
सांस लेना पर दिक्कत हो रहा है, कोई बोलता है उनका आंखों में जलन हो रहा है, कोई घुटन सा महसूस हो रहा है, तो कहने का मतलब पहले से बहुत ही खराब है अभी.
Meanwhile, those visiting the city from elsewhere have had their holidays ruined.
बच्चे को लेके आया, उसका भी बहुत ब्रीदिंग प्रॉब्लम हो रहा, बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रहा, और यार राष्ट्रपति भवन देखने आए, आधा घंटा हो गए, कुछ नहीं देख पाए. ये पोल्यूशन के द्वारा ही हो रहा है.
After several days of thick smog, the Delhi government on Thursday announced a series of mitigating actions, including shutting down public schools and reintroducing a scheme which only allows cars to drive on the roads on alternate days. Doctors, however, are warning the damage may already have been done.
So it will lead to more chances of breathing difficulty, cough, chest tightness. People with underlying asthma will have worsening of symptoms and they will need to take more medication. People with heart failure or heart problem will have worsening of their heart disease, and there will be an increase in number of people coming to emergency with respiratory failure because of high levels of pollution.
For now, there is little that Delhiites can do except sit indoors and hope that the wind changes direction soon. Kieran Stacey, Financial Times, New Delhi.
Now we're going to show you video of something happening right now that has hundreds of millions of people buying masks and hiding inside. The Chinese are in the throes of what reporters are calling airpocalypse. And ABC's Gloria Rivera is truly there in the thick of it all.
The sun was shining in Beijing today, but you wouldn't know it. Just being outside can make eyes itch and throats burn.
You feel like a little bit suffocated.
This could be my lung, tweeted one Chinese resident. And time-lapse photos showed how chemical clouds made buildings disappear. Zero wind, freezing temperatures, and factories going full tilt made this week a perfect storm for pollution. At its peak, pollution hit 755 in Beijing, making breathing extremely hazardous. By comparison, the worst polluted city in the U.S., Bakersfield, California, hit a high of 159 last year. It's super toxic air.
Particle pollution like that can actually cause heart attacks and strokes that can kill people. It's lethal.
This photo from a recent Greenpeace study shows what an air filter looks like after just 24 hours in Beijing. Watch me wipe a thin layer that's accumulated on most cars. That's soot and grime. And this is my own air purifier. Watch this. Look, that's what we're breathing in Beijing. One expert told me it's like becoming an instant smoker. Beijing did issue emergency warnings for the first time ever this year, signs the government can't avoid problems everyone can see. Gloria Rivera, ABC News, Beijing.
And another note about this. When our team visited China 2 years ago, we noticed the difference between the polluted air outside in Beijing and how we felt when we walked inside the American embassy, where the air was much cleaner. Well, we were told that the pollution is so severe there because of health issues, the embassy creates special filtered air for embassy workers, so they'll have air as clean as the air here back home.
At its worst, Beijing's air quality looked like this. In 2013, the air quality was deemed unhealthy or hazardous for over half the year, peaking in Beijing at 35 times the World Health Organization's recommended limit. It was so bad that Premier Li Keqiang declared a war on pollution at China's annual high-profile National People's Congress. 5 years later, in March 2019, as Premier Li again opened the NPC meetings, the smog outside was still 10 times worse than what the WHO defines as healthy. Even as China cracks down on pollution like never before, the country remains one of the world's worst polluters. This is your Bloomberg Quick Take on China's smog. China overtook the US as the world's biggest source of greenhouse gases in 2006, helping put the globe on a path to miss United Nations targets aimed at stemming the rise in the Earth's temperature.
This cheap power from coal and cheap factory production that's powered by coal has helped China turn into this economic giant that has helped produce cheap goods for the rest of the world and help drive the world's economy. And so in a sense, Chinese people are paying a tax in breathing this bad air for the benefit of consumers all over the world.
The WHO estimates more than 1 million Chinese died from dirty air in 2016. Another study puts the tally even higher, at 4,000 deaths a day. Pollution is said to have been the main cause of social unrest in recent years, with social media helping to amplify complaints. On Weibo, China's Twitter-like online platform, people blamed factories for polluting the air and the government for not doing enough. In February 2015, a Chinese investigative journalist published a self-funded documentary about the country's air pollution problem. More than 100 million people watched Under the Dome before it was banned from Chinese video websites 6 days after its release. Shortly after, President Xi Jinping pledged to unleash an iron hand to punish environmental polluters. In the last few years, the government has spent billions of yuan tightening environmental regulations, scrapping coal-fired power plants, and switching millions of homes and businesses from coal to natural gas.
The regulations and policies have worked. The U.S. State Department monitors particulate matter in the air in its Beijing embassy, and these recordings show that 2018 was the lowest level in a decade, and the winter of 2017 and 2018 was one of the best as far as air quality goes. It's not perfect, but it's much, much better than the heyday of the 2013 pollution problems.
China is now the world's biggest investor in green energy. It spent over $100 billion in 2018, which was 56% more than the US. Initiatives have included supporting the electric vehicle industry by providing subsidies for EV buyers and helping build out infrastructure that allows electric cars to drive and charge around its cities.
EV sales are huge in China. It's the biggest market in the world for electric vehicles. It's not just cars as well. Electric buses are a huge deal in China.
China's betting big on solar energy as well. In 2019, over a third of the world's solar panels are estimated to be installed in China. But the war on pollution promises to be a long one. 4 decades of breakneck economic growth have turned China into the world's biggest carbon emitter, and it's still going to depend on coal for years to come.
With air pollution soaring to alarming levels across India, the government is launching a new monitoring system to keep tabs on the problem. The quality index will indicate whether air is healthy, poor, harmful or hazardous. Pollution is the cause of more than 600,000 premature deaths every year in India, according to the World Health Organization. Launching the new index, Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasised that a change of lifestyle was needed to turn things around. Medics say by the time people in New Delhi turn 35, their lungs start behaving like those of a smoker.
In my practice, I'm seeing a rise in number of cases. Not only are the cases rising, we are having difficulty controlling patients which were easily controlled earlier on.
New Delhi already has air quality monitors, but experts say the readings may not be reliable. The new index will keep across pollution in 10 major cities.
New Delhi residents spend most days enveloped in a layer of smog, inhaling toxic air with every breath. Vehicle exhaust, construction sites, factories, brick kilns, and burning crops and rubbish are the main contributors to the city's dirty air. But it is the high level of unseen microscopic pollution that worries environmentalists the most. According to WHO, the safe limit for airborne particulate matter, less than 2.5 microns in diameter, is just 10 micrograms per cubic meter. India specifies 40 micrograms as safe. But in Delhi, the level sometimes rises to more than 400 micrograms.
एक बाल का जो diameter होता है वो है 50 micron.
The diameter of a human hair is 50 microns. Compare this to 2.5 microns. It's not even visible. These tiny particles are very toxic and enter our body directly through the air we breathe.
Delhi's topography is partly responsible for high levels of pollution in the city. It lies in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, an area that traps bad air and pollution.
It's a low-lying area bounded in north by Himalaya and in south by the mountain ranges. So you have basically a place, low-lying area where you are emitting, and the meteorology of the wind is not actually allowing the pollutants to disperse very easily.
Last year, Delhi implemented the Graded Action Response Plan. It calls for various short-term emergency measures depending on the level of pollution in the air.
जो बदरपुर कोल पावर प्लांट है, इसको बंद कर दिया गया है.
All the coal power plants, brick kilns, and industries running on biomass in Delhi were shut down.
जो बायोमास और कोयले पे चलते हैं, उनको भी बंद किया गया था.
These steps led to a slight improvement in the air quality index in 2018 as compared to the previous 2 years. Now the government is focusing on long-term measures, which include far-reaching permanent policy changes, especially for automotive fuels.
40% of the pollution in Delhi is vehicular. We are trying to introduce Euro 6 emission standards from 2020 and bring in liquefied natural gas for heavy vehicles. Within the capital region, we have listed what fuels may be used.
Experts believe, apart from the government action, people's support for switching to public transport and adopting an eco-friendly lifestyle could help clear Delhi's air. Ritul Joshi, VOA News, New Delhi, India.
You can see the pollution.
Every winter we go through this, and every winter since childhood has gotten worse and worse and worse.
You can taste it. How does this pollution make you feel?
We are feeling in eyes, in throat, but what we can do? We are in a gas chamber. There is no remedy.
It has this chemical, almost paint-like taste.
स्कूल बंद हो जाने चाहिए, लोग घरों से बाहर नहीं निकलने चाहिए.
Each year, the pollution has been steadily getting worse. The government of India is struggling to get its arms around this problem. A big reason why Delhi has such bad pollution is the use of diesel fuel. And that is a huge contributor to the pollution here. And there's also really bad traffic. And cars that are stuck in traffic produce more pollution. So this is the Patel Chest Institute, which is the biggest hospital in Delhi specializing in respiratory disease. At this time of year, it's more crowded than normal. The hallways inside are packed with people wearing masks, coughing, having visible respiratory difficulties. What worries people is this is not a totally new problem. One of the first things you see in our house is this portable pollution meter. And it seems like we're totally paranoid about this issue. But it actually helps us because we're trying to control the air inside the house and make sure that the air we breathe and our kids breathe at night in their rooms isn't super polluted. And what's scary is even inside our house, with these giant air filters going full blast, we're still getting readings that are several times the safe limit, which means that there is a fair amount of pollution, more than most cities in the world, right here inside our house with all the doors closed and the air filters on full blast. In a place like this, you see people dealing with it in different ways. Some folks just go on with their lives. Other people are taking precautions, trying to do their best to filter out these tiny particles.
You are inhaling a slow poison.
Slow poison.
Yes, it is a slow poison, and you have to die with this one day. No remedy seems anywhere to control all these things.
You just feel like a little bit helpless. I mean, you do see small changes, but you sort of feel like, okay, it's so bad, how can you fix it?
And so the concern is that it's almost a hopeless situation. It's something you can't control, and that's something that people are going to learn to accept and have to live with, this really toxic air at a certain time of year.
Nitrogen dioxide is a gas emitted during the combustion of fossil fuels. It's released from the tailpipes of cars and the smokestacks of power plants. Together, these emissions affect the quality of air we breathe. Since 2004, an instrument aboard NASA's Ora satellite has measured levels of nitrogen dioxide in Earth's atmosphere. In 2014, we released satellite images that show how environmental regulations have led to reductions in nitrogen dioxide over major U.S. cities. Now we created global maps that allow us to see how levels have changed around the world over the last decade. In Western Europe, despite the recent vehicle emissions scandal, nitrogen dioxide levels have decreased by as much as 50% due to tighter environmental controls. In China, we see an increase in levels over most of the country due to a rise in coal use for power generation, but decreases for some cities like Beijing, where a growing middle class is now demanding cleaner air. In the Middle East, we see decreases in nitrogen dioxide levels over Syria due to the country's civil war and displacement of its population. Meanwhile, levels have gone up in neighboring countries where millions of Syrians have taken refuge. In the US, the only increases are in regions with intensive oil and natural gas extraction, including fracking. In North Dakota and Texas, we see increases of 30% in some areas. By monitoring levels of nitrogen dioxide from space, we can see and quantify the effects of things like energy usage, environmental policy, and even civil unrest on air quality across the globe.
Early morning, barely visible in the smog, Delhi's iconic India Gate. For years, most people in the sprawling city of 23 million never questioned the quality of the air. Just a mix of desert dust and winter fog was the urban myth. But a 2014 World Health Organization study of 1,600 cities found India's capital has the most toxic air in the world, largely due to the highest concentrations of microscopic particles known as PM 2.5. We go on a rickshaw ride with American scientist Joshua Apte to test the air for ourselves. He's been monitoring Delhi's pollution since 2007.
We're looking at levels of PM 2.5 right now that are around 250 to 300 micrograms per cubic meter, so 25 to 30 times higher than that long-term standard that we might care about.
But everyone keeps talking about how bad it is in Beijing, but not so much in Delhi.
I think that's really just a function of awareness. Levels in Delhi are about 45 or 50% higher than those levels in Beijing.
Really?
So the standard from the World Health Organization is 10. Typical levels in Beijing are just about 100 precisely. And in Delhi over the past few years, the average has been more like 150.
Apte says to the naked eye, Delhi may not appear as bad as Beijing because PM 2.5s are practically invisible, but they're the most damaging to the lungs.
Our children are falling sick our elders are falling sick.
To help residents cope with the bad air, entrepreneur Barun Agarwal has developed an air purification technique combining filters and plants. Ever since Delhi's pollution problems started making headlines, his sales have taken off.
Every year, the problem is only getting worse. It's not getting better at all because we're adding 1,400 cars to our streets every single day in just the city of Delhi. The quality of our fuel is very, very poor. We're still at Euro 3 and Euro 4 fuel in India. And we're burning a lot of biomass during the winter time for people to stay warm in the winter.
As India makes economic development a priority, pollution levels are only set to increase. Studies show some 660 million Indians lose about 3 years of their lives because of the air they breathe. But for change to happen, experts say India's policymakers need to first catch wind of a problem they can no longer ignore. Sunima Udas, CNN, New Delhi.
Well, here I am on the balcony of the ABC Beijing Bureau. Normally quite a good view, but as you can see, it's pretty soupy at the moment. This winter has brought Beijing's air quality into, well, I was going to say sharp focus, but I'm not quite sure that that's the right turn of phrase. Air quality here has been a big problem in recent weeks. In fact, 2 weeks ago, it was off the Richter. It was the highest level that these measuring instruments had been able to cope with, and normally they sort of rate things as sort of dangerous, something hazardous, and then beyond hazardous. It was just, like I say, way beyond anything anyone had ever seen. Well, a few blue sky days, and now it's back. Chinese government officials have promised to do something about this, but it's a huge problem. Basically, coal-fired power stations in neighbouring provinces in Hebei, Shanxi, Inner Mongolia, we get material coming from there, drifting into Beijing, and it's just locked in here by the mountains that surround this city. Of course, then it mixes up with all the stuff that's coming out of cars and this fog that we're seeing as well, and just sits here until the wind comes along. Now, the government might be telling people that it's going to do something about this in the long run, but in the meantime, the residents of Beijing are thinking, why should we wait for decades for this problem to be fixed? In the short term, they're going for other sort of solutions, you know, using this sort of thing, face masks that go on and protect you a little bit, but these particulate matters are so small that they're getting in through the face masks anyway. The solutions are as big as the problem. Really, China's reliance on coal-fired power is at the core of this problem. And driving this economy along, you need electricity, and you know, when you've got 70 or 80% of your electricity coming from coal-fired power, it's going to be a problem, especially when you've got these power stations that are still using some pretty clapped out technology. You know, they need to be getting the latest gear in there and fixing it up. But you know, this reliance on coal-fired power is a big part of the problem. Cars is another part of the problem. You know, you've got millions of cars in this city. People need to be taking public transport. Public transport's already rammed, so I can't imagine how much more you can be piling people, for example, onto the subway. So the government's got to come up with more public transport solutions. Another solution which NGOs like Greenpeace have proposed in the short term is for regional governments to start cooperating with one another. For example, at the moment you've got these provincial governors. Now the number one way in which their performance is measured is GDP growth. Now if they're competing with one another for better and better GDP growth, they don't want to put the brakes on. They don't want to slow down economic growth. So the only way, according to the likes of Greenpeace, you can get a sort of regional solution together is, say, for the 5 provinces around Beijing to come together with the national government here and come up with a solution for all of, for example, central and northeastern China, because this is not a city's problem. It's much bigger than that. It's a problem of an entire area. But either way, any solution is going to be probably quite some way off. And in the meantime, I guess this is just what we've got to put up with.
If you're living in India's capital, New Delhi, chances are you'll wake up to something like this. Air so filthy that it could cause heart and lung problems. By the way, the higher the reading on this pollution monitor, the worse the air quality. A number above 50 is unhealthy, and anything above 300 means the air is toxic enough to require a gas mask.
Rain check.
According to World Health Organization estimates, Delhi is one of the world's most polluted big cities. Why? Well, emissions from cars, factories, construction dust, and the burning of rubbish and crop stubble. But just how much pollution are Delhi residents breathing in? To find the answer, I carried an air quality monitor for a day. Turns out, it depends what time it is, where you are, and what you're doing. Delhi's air quality is worse in the morning and evening during winter months. Inside the train, well, you need a gas mask like this one.
Next station is Shivaji Stadium.
The air in underground station is a little worse than inside the train. So keep that mask on. Out on the street, it's even worse. But this reading isn't the worst my pollution monitor showed. It hit this a month or so before. India's top court recently banned the sale of smoke-causing firecrackers, but pollution levels are rising once again. Of course, auto rickshaw rides are fun, but sitting next to trucks and buses spewing out fumes exposes you to even more toxic air. Okay, this is going to be the real test to see if the 4 air purifiers in my office actually work. But did you notice that our friend still has that sad face? That's because the air is still worse than the average in Times Square in New York. For a caffeine shot at 6 p.m., I took my friend along. That means you still need a mask while eating or drinking in some restaurants. Experts say air pollution in Delhi could get worse in the coming days as temperature drops further. So if you're living in Delhi, brace yourself for more smoggy mornings and evenings.
Forget Beijing, India's largest city, New Delhi, is suffering far worse pollution. The New York Times reports that on Thursday, a key measurement used to test air quality was more than twice as hazardous in Delhi as in the Chinese capital. Earlier this week, a separate Indian measure also showed record levels of pollution.
How severe your smog is going to be will depend entirely on the level of pollution that you are generating in the city. And that is becoming really impossible because if you look at the pollution sources in Delhi, what is increasing very rapidly are the vehicles. Now you do have other sources, there are power plants, there is an industry, there are other open burning problem.
Delhi isn't the only city growing faster than nature can cope with. The World Health Organization lists 6 Indian metro areas among the 10 most polluted. The government is working on a new plan to improve air quality, but it's unlikely to be implemented for months, if not years.
China's choking pollution is not stifling creativity. For the minimalist, there's this nose mask, which the company donated to traffic cops. Or something a tad more cumbersome, this smog-fighting bicycle, built by Beijing artist Matt Hope.
The idea is that the purified air would come through this tube.
Yeah, and then you can breathe it in here. How well this Chinese Air Force mask works, I have no idea.
Hope explains the bike is more art than appliance, dreamed up to vent frustration.
It makes you not want to live here.
The pollution is so bad.
Yeah.
Pollution prompted a travel company in Henan province to promote fresh air brought down from the mountains by letting people breathe bags of it. This woman, 8 months pregnant, declared, "I just breathed and the baby moved." Pollution is blamed for up to 500,000 early deaths each year in China. An article in the Lancet explains lowered life expectancy is primarily due to heart and respiratory diseases. The problem is so serious that it spawns spoofs. This rather theatrical video shows Chinese villagers collecting cans of fresh air in air quotes. The man behind it is self-professed millionaire and philanthropist Chen Guangbio, who's known for recently trying to buy the New York Times. He started producing cans of fresh air with his face on it, handing them out on a smoggy day last year. I believe that if we don't protect our air today, we will have to buy fresh air one day, he said. There's actually a price tag for fresh air. Through this dramatic way or gimmick, I try to advocate protecting our environment.
So even you admit this is a gimmick. This is really to raise awareness more than anything else.
I believe that through such a show, I can wake people up, he told me. There are also government efforts to fight pollution. This drone was developed by a state military aviation group. It claims to disperse smog-busting particles. A fog cannon appeared in local media. It sprays water and allegedly prevents dust and reduces the concentration of pollutants.
So
Chen Guangbio demonstrated his canned air. This is very fresh. Your mind must be very clear now, he said.
It smells more like lead.
It could be decades before China solves its air pollution problem. In the meantime, there's a photo editing app for smartphones. One touch and the smog disappears. For CBS This Morning, Seth Doan, Beijing.
You gotta have one of these things. It's a lifesaver. In China, it is a necessity. Oh yeah, because you never know what the AQI is gonna be. You need one of these things. I mean, especially in Beijing. I mean, come on, look at the sky. I mean, I guess it's nice today.
But one of the costs, some of the worst air quality in the world.
The pollution is at alarming levels.
Which closed schools and airports.
The buildings over there are barely visible. Most people are not outdoors, and if they are, many of them are wearing masks.
Over the past 4 decades, China's economy has maintained high-speed growth and drawn worldwide attention with its achievements. However, the pollution that comes with it, particularly that of the air, has also drawn worldwide attention. Smog was once even a synonym of China.
I remember before the first time that I came, everyone said to me, be careful of the air. I didn't really know what to expect.
In my impression is continuous almost 1 week, even longer. And also the area is not Beijing, it's not Hebei, it's also including Shanxi, Shandong, and Henan province. So it's large area and long time.
The Great London smog at the end of the last century or early into this century in Los Angeles, the smog starting in the 40s, really for several decades around then.
We have similarities with London because of coal. We have similarities with Los Angeles because of the vehicle. But in total, we have, I think it's more complex and more difficulties to handle.
In 2013, the average number of smog days reached its highest record in China in 52 years. Smog seriously threatened people's health, their daily lives, and work. Its impact had extended to every socioeconomic aspect. Calls to tackle the smog were accumulating. But unlike London or Los Angeles, China's air pollution was more complicated and compounded by varying regional climates and environments. So the challenge to control the smog was more significant.
Carol, you want to try or? What do you think about the air quality in China?
Of course, the pollution is all over in the world.
London might be a little bit better, but we still got the same issues.
Sometimes it's quite harsh, but most of the time it's all right.
I find I don't have to wear a mask as often.
The overall trend is usually getting better in at least in Beijing.
It took a while in the United States, my country, for us to pay attention to air pollution, and then once we did, it took a while to get a handle on it. Well, the Clean Air Act, which was passed in the late 1960s and really went into effect around 1970. In London, they passed the London Clean Air Act, and in California, they passed a similar kind of a law. And it wasn't long after that that the air started getting cleaner.
If you look at the history of Los Angeles, London, it's more than 15 years. But today, we should not using 15 years or 16 years because you have more historic experience. China has known a lot from US and Europe. 2012, China just issued the new air quality standards. That is the first time we put the PM 2.5 in national air quality standards. And then the following the action plan, 2013, you need the supporting to the legislation and the standards and regulation.
Smog control needs to be preceded by relevant legislation. China improved its dedicated laws, regulations, and emission standards while introducing new ones, preventing and controlling air pollution, and providing critical support for smog control. But the key to smog control and air quality improvement lies in eliminating the root causes and scientifically understanding what and how air pollutants are formed so that they may be prevented and controlled. China is resorting to technology to tackle smog and achieve its environmental protection targets.
I gotta figure out a way to sell these masks.
Once we haven't had this tool, so we took the tool out to do the measurement. We did measurement in Beijing and also in Tibet, in Shanghai as well, and in Wudang Mountains. Some measurement we did was in the relatively polluted environment. In comparison, we did in a clean environment, like in Tibet and the Wudang Mountains. So by doing the comparison, you can see how the formation are different in different regions. We started to work on this about 10 years ago. Yes, before we work on it, the whole community in the world, we have no tools to measure them.
Advanced science and technology and big data applications allow us to avoid a traditionally rigid management model in online monitoring, differential management, and staggering peak production. Data also makes pollution containment more accurate and efficient. We may by no means sacrifice our eco-environment for temporary economic development. We strive to maintain economic growth while effectively controlling pollution.
I do believe that one of the things that China has going for it that could help to speed up progress is a real embrace of technology. There's been quite a bit of progress that's made in the last few years in reducing emissions. Some people say that that's simply due to an economic slowdown.
When you talk about the slowing down, actually in China, recent 10 years, the decrease is a growth rate decrease, but it still grows. You say the Beijing's GDP is going up, which means the activity is increased and the total generation of the pollutant is increased. But the actual situation is the total emission is decreased.
We're never going to win if the only way that we're going to deal with pollution is to take it outside the economy. We have to deal with it within the economy because we live within the economy.
In China, in different regions, we say the environment action will help to improve the economy pattern more healthy, not only for environmental parts, but also for market competition.
Only by persevering in scientific control may the environment and economy develop in harmony. After 5 years of efforts, China achieved emission reduction results that took developed Western countries decades to attain. China's efforts in this regard once again draw global attention. The 2019 World Environment Day will focus on air pollution. This time, as the host, China will showcase to the world its accomplishments in smog control.
Even though it's been better, for me it's really not good. Like I'm really not used to it, like because you really smell the pollution too.
Overall, it's getting better, but it still has a long way to go.
To me, there's sort of not there isn't really that break point because we're still having some kind of impact. It's like saying, you know, I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, but if at the end of the diet I go back to my old way of eating, I'm going to gain the 10 pounds back. So, you know, you really have to sort of change your lifestyle, and I think of it the same way when it relates to air pollution, is we can use control technology to get to a certain point, but then we really have to sort of change the fundamentals about the way that we live on this earth.
Yeah, fully agree with you. We have a lot of working to do for the future improvements.
The environment is people's livelihood. Forest-covered mountains are beautiful. The blue sky is a bliss. In 2018, the ratio of average good air days in 338 prefecture-level cities and above was 79.3%, which was 1.3 percentage points higher than last year. In the past 3 years, Beijing achieved a reduction in PM 2.5 pollution levels that took Los Angeles, US, 12 years to complete. China has made outstanding achievements in tackling air pollution. But if China wants to further significantly reduce the concentration of PM 2.5 in the near future, and strives to increase the proportion of average good air days to the aim of over 80%, China needs to continue its race in winning the battle for blue skies.
What am I gonna do if I can't sell these masks? Are you allergic to pollen? Because this will also protect you against pollen and allergies and or the sunshine. Extreme cold, the wind, right? What? You don't need it now?